Keanu Reeves had always kept to himself in the quiet cul-de-sac of Red Leaf Ridge. His home sat on the corner lot, tucked beneath towering cedar trees that rustled like whispers in the night. Neighbors rarely saw him outside, except during early morning walks with his rescue dog, Holly. But on one particularly cold autumn night, something new broke the silence. A blazing white floodlight mounted above Keanu's garage snapped on and stayed on, all night long. It didn't flicker, didn't dim, didn't shut off, not even once. It shone across the entire neighborhood like a lighthouse beacon, sweeping through bedroom windows and carving long, sharp shadows across the street. By 3 a.m., the complaints had already begun. Mr. Devereaux from across the street stormed outside in his robe, shielding his eyes as he glared at Keanu's house. Mrs. Ellings, who lived next door, posted in the HOA Facebook group, "Whose light is this? Some of us have work in the morning." Others chimed in with angry emojis, accusations, and dramatic threats of action. Not a single person knocked on Keanu's door to ask what was happening. They simply assumed the worst. Keanu had installed the obnoxious light intentionally. And by sunrise, the HOA president, Gerald Hartman, was pacing across his living room rehearsing the speech he would deliver to Keanu, passionately suggesting that one resident's selfishness shouldn't disturb the peace of the entire community. The next night, the floodlight returned, brighter, harsher, almost unnatural. Keanu's house looked like it was under investigation by the FBI. Kids complained. A couple of dogs barked at the bright glow. A neighbor 2 streets away claimed he could feel heat from the light. That was enough for the HOA board to snap into action. A formal violation notice was drafted at record speed, light pollution, Class B infraction. Gerald marched to Keanu's front door at 7 a.m. sharp, clutching the letter as if it were a sacred decree. He knocked firmly, repeatedly, until Keanu opened the door with tired eyes and a quiet, respectful expression. "Good morning, sir. Is everything okay?" Keanu asked gently. Gerald felt slightly thrown off. He had expected defiance, an argument, something loud. "Your floodlight," he said sharply. "It's violating HOA regulations and disturbing everyone. It must be shut off immediately. No exceptions." Keanu nodded slowly, studying the letter, but he didn't argue. "I understand," he said. "But I need it on for a reason." Gerald's eyebrows tightened. "What reason?" he demanded. Keanu hesitated for the slightest moment, then replied, "I'm not ready to say. Not yet." Gerald left with even more suspicion than before. And that night, when the sun dipped and darkness settled over the neighborhood, the floodlight clicked on again with a piercing bang and glowed through the entire night. People were furious now. Anonymous complaints poured into the HOA inbox. Someone threatened to call the police. Another claimed the light caused their migraines. A few residents suggested that Keanu was losing it or trying to start a fight with the community. But what none of them noticed, not one of the dozens of neighbors who drove, walked, or peeked through their blinds, was that Keanu had stopped sleeping. His front porch light stayed off, but the glow of the floodlight reflected faintly inside his living room, where he sat on the edge of the couch each night, eyes fixed on a monitor displaying live security footage. His dog Holly lay pressed against his leg, trembling whenever the bushes across the yard rustled. For 3 nights straight, Keanu watched the same pattern unfold on the camera. A shadow, tall, thin, deliberate, hovering near the far left corner of his property. It moved differently depending on the hour, sometimes standing still for minutes at a time, other moments darting between the trees. At first, he thought it was a coyote or maybe a trespassing teen trying to prank the famous actor who lived on the corner. But on the second night, when the figure stepped directly into the light, Keanu saw the glint of something metallic in its hand. And on the third night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the figure pressed its face close to the camera. The freeze frame captured a pair of eyes that were too cold, too focused, too intentional to belong to anything harmless. Keanu kept the floodlight blazing because something was out there. Someone who wasn't wandering. Someone who wasn't lost. Someone who was coming back night after night, and getting closer. Keanu Reeves wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting the entire neighborhood, but the HOA didn't know that yet. And they had no idea that the next night, the shadow would finally step out of the trees and run straight toward someone's home. The fourth night began like the others, restless, tense, heavy with the kind of silence that feels wrong. The floodlight snapped on exactly at dusk, washing Keanu's driveway and yard in a harsh white glow that carved out every blade of grass like it was under a microscope. Most of the neighborhood had their curtains sealed tight now. People whispered as they walked their dogs. Mrs. Ellings muttered that she'd start a petition, and Gerald, the HOA president, was convinced this was an act of rebellion. He prepared fine after fine, ready to make Keanu learn his lesson. But while the neighborhood simmered with irritation and assumptions, Keanu Reeves sat alone in his living room watching every flicker of movement on his security monitors. Holly lay beside him, head resting on his knee, her ears twitching with every sound outside. Keanu stroked her fur, trying to keep her calm. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're watching, just like last time." But his own hands were trembling. He had spent the previous night rewinding the footage again and again, studying the shadowy figure, the way it moved with purpose, the way it seemed to test the edges of the light, the way it paused and listened, as if it knew Keanu was inside watching. He had shown the footage to no one, not even the police yet. He wanted more proof, something undeniable, something that told the full story. And tonight, he would get it. At 12:48 a.m., the bushes at the far corner of his property began to shiver. Keanu leaned forward, lowering the volume on the TV until the only sound in the room was Holly's quickening breath. The figure appeared, taller than before, closer than ever. This time, it wasn't lingering, it was approaching. It crept toward Keanu's yard with steady, deliberate steps, as if counting them. 1, 2, 3. Keanu's heartbeat thudded inside his ears. The floodlight hit the figure's shoulder and illuminated a pale sleeve. A male's silhouette, slim but strong. The same metallic glint appeared again in his hand. Holly growled, low and warning, as Keanu moved his hand toward his phone. But before he could dial anyone, the figure stopped and then turned its head sharply to the right, toward another house. Gerald Hartman's house. The HOA president who had spent the entire day telling everyone that Keanu was being dramatic, that the light was unnecessary, that the neighborhood was safe. The figure stepped off Keanu's property and crossed into Gerald's side yard, moving with chilling confidence. Keanu froze. His breath caught. The camera angle switched. Camera 2, the one pointing toward the street. The figure was not just wandering, not even close. He was moving straight toward the Hartman residence. Keanu shot to his feet. "Holly, stay." She whimpered but obeyed. He grabbed the flashlight near his door and bolted outside. The cold air slapped his face as he ran across his yard. The floodlight threw his shadow forward like a warning flare. "Hey!" Keanu shouted. The figure didn't turn, didn't even flinch. Keanu sprinted faster, but the man slipped between the hedges beside Gerald's garage. By the time Keanu reached the side yard, the figure was standing right beneath Gerald's kitchen window, slowly raising the metallic object in his hand. It wasn't a knife. It wasn't a tool. It was a crowbar. Keanu lunged forward. "HOA!" he yelled again, louder, commanding. The figure jolted, stepping back into the shadow, just out of the floodlight's reach. Keanu took another step. The man turned, revealing half his face, thin jaw, hollow cheeks, eyes wide with something between madness and determination. And then, without warning, he bolted. He sprinted into the trees behind the house, vanishing into darkness with terrifying speed. Keanu chased him halfway down the hill but lost him within seconds. He stood there, chest heaving, breath mixing with the cold night air. This wasn't a coyote. This wasn't a prank. Someone had been casing the neighborhood for days. Someone prepared. Someone bold. Someone dangerous. And Keanu had been the only one who saw it coming. By the time he returned to the house, Gerald's porch light had flicked on. Gerald stepped outside in his robe, annoyed, confused, and half asleep. "What on earth are you doing on my property at this hour?" he barked. Keanu pointed toward the trees, still breathless. Someone was here. He was trying to break in. Gerald scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Your floodlight paranoia is making you imagine things." Keanu clenched his jaw. "I have footage," he said firmly. "Come inside. You need to see it." But Gerald shook his head. "No, enough is enough. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing the maximum penalty for your light violation. Good night, Mr. Reeves." And with that, he turned away, completely unaware that the man in the trees had only retreated, not disappeared. The next morning broke with a strange mix of calm and tension, like the neighborhood was holding its breath but didn't know why. Frost clung to the leaves, the sun hovered low, and Keanu Reeves sat at his kitchen table replaying the same 30 seconds of security footage over and over again. The crowbar, the hollow face, the deliberate steps, the figure's eyes reflecting the floodlight like a predator. Keanu paused the footage on the moment the man lifted the tool beneath Gerald's window. He zoomed in, tracing the outline of the man's hand, the tension in his stance. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Holly sat beside him, ears perked, watching her owner with quiet concern. Keanu exhaled and rubbed his temples. He hadn't slept at all, not after chasing a criminal through the trees, not after trying and failing to convince Gerald his home had been seconds away from a break-in. But what frustrated Keanu most wasn't the danger. It was the disbelief. The way the HOA had turned something serious into something petty. The way Gerald's pride blinded him, and the way neighbors, hiding behind curtains and Facebook posts, ignored the blazing warning right in front of them. At 9:15 a.m., just as Keanu was preparing to call the police with the footage, there was a sharp knock at the door. 3 rhythmic taps, confident, impatient, unmistakable. Keanu didn't have to guess. He opened the door to find Gerald Hartman, perfectly groomed, holding a clipboard and wearing the stern expression of a man who'd come to deliver a verdict. "Mr. Reeves," he said coolly, "I'm issuing the formal Level 2 violation notice. Your floodlight is a disturbance and a hazard to community peace. If it remains on tonight, you will receive a fine of—" Keanu didn't let him finish. "Gerald," he said gently, "you need to see something first." Gerald stiffened. "I'm not." Keanu stepped aside and motioned toward the living room. "Please." "I wouldn't insist unless it was serious." Something in Keanu's calm tone made Gerald hesitate, just for a second. Then, reluctantly, he walked inside. The moment the footage began to play, Gerald's confident posture faded. He leaned forward slightly, watching as the shadowy figure crept toward Keanu's yard. His eyebrows twitched when the crowbar glimmered beneath the floodlight. His lips pressed together when the man slipped into Gerald's yard, and when the figure stood beneath his kitchen window, raising the crowbar to test the frame, Gerald's knuckles turned white around his clipboard. Keanu paused the video. "That was last night," he said quietly. "At 12:48. Gerald swallowed hard. This can't be real." "It's very real," Keanu replied, "and it's why the floodlight stayed on." Gerald stared at the frozen image on the screen, his expression wavering between shock and denial. Why would someone target my house?" Keanu shrugged slightly. "Maybe they thought you weren't paying attention. Maybe they noticed your routines. Maybe they saw you posting online instead of checking your yard." Gerald flinched at the last remark. Holly rose to her feet, sensing the shift in the room. The silence grew heavy as Gerald slowly lowered himself onto the edge of Keanu's sofa. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, the man looked small, human, vulnerable. "Mr. Reeves," he said quietly, "why didn't you call the police immediately?" "I wanted clear evidence. And the light. It scared him off each time, and it gave me visibility. Without it, he would have gotten inside." Gerald's breathing grew tight. His eyes were locked on the screen. "Do you think he'll come back?" Keanu didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, he wasn't wandering randomly. He was testing locks, watching patterns, coming closer each night. "He's building confidence." Gerald's clipboard slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. The man looked shaken, genuinely shaken, his authority stripped away, leaving only fear and disbelief. Keanu stepped toward the window and looked outside at the quiet street. The floodlight was off in daylight, but its presence lingered like a guardian waiting for dusk. "Tonight," Keanu said, "he'll return, especially now that he knows he was almost seen." Gerald stood slowly. His voice trembled. "Mr. Reeves, what do we do?" Keanu faced him, calm but resolute. First, you dropped the violation notice. Gerald nodded immediately. Of course. Done. Second, Keanu continued, you helped me warn the neighborhood, and you stay inside tonight. With the light on. Yes, Keanu said. With the light on. Gerald swallowed. And you. Keanu's eyes moved back toward the screen, where the man's face was frozen in a half-lit snarl. I'll be watching, he said softly, and I won't let him hurt anyone. But neither of them knew that the intruder was already planning something different for the next night. Something bolder, darker, and far more dangerous than a break-in. The sun dipped behind a ridge earlier than usual that evening, fading into a molten orange glow that quickly surrendered to darkness. And with darkness came tension, sharp, invisible, gripping the entire neighborhood. Word had spread faster than Gerald expected. The HOA group chat exploded with panic once he posted the still image from Keanu's security footage. No one questioned Keanu anymore. No one complained about the light. The bravest families double-checked their locks. The anxious ones sat awake on couches with lamps on. For the first time in Red Leaf Ridge history, the neighborhood looked less like a peaceful community and more like a town silently bracing for a storm. Keanu stood outside as the last traces of daylight faded. Holly stayed at his heel, alert. He had repositioned the cameras, tightened the floodlight brackets, and even placed motion sensors along his side yard. The air felt heavier tonight, colder, sharper, as if the wind itself knew what was coming. From across the street, Gerald stepped outside, wearing a thick robe, clutching a thermos with shaking hands. Their eyes met. For once, Gerald didn't look like an authority figure. He looked like a man praying this night would pass uneventfully. You sure about this? Gerald asked, trying to sound steady. Keanu nodded. He came 4 nights in a row. He'll come tonight. Gerald swallowed hard. And you'll stop him? Keanu didn't answer directly. I'll make sure no one gets hurt. The neighborhood fell still. Even the crickets seemed to sense the danger. At exactly 10:17 p.m., the floodlight burst alive with a sharp WHOM page, flooding Keanu's yard in white fire. Gerald flinched at the brightness, but Keanu didn't. He stepped closer to his security monitor inside the open living room window. Nothing yet. No movement. Just the same quiet stillness. Then it happened. Slow at first. Camera 3 pinged. A soft rustle in the bushes by the tree line. Keanu leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Holly growled softly, body tensed like a spring. The figure appeared, but not the way Keanu expected. Tonight, he wasn't creeping. He wasn't testing windows. He wasn't hiding. He was walking straight toward Keanu's house. Keanu's pulse quickened. The man stepped boldly into the light, crowbar glinting like a blade of ice in his fist. His pale face caught the full glow this time, gaunt cheeks, cracked lips, and eyes so unhinged they looked hollow. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't cautious. He looked set on something. Keanu stepped outside, keeping his voice calm but firm. Stop right there. The man froze for half a second, half a heartbeat. Then he tilted his head, studying Keanu with a strange, twisted smirk. You're the one watching, the man murmured, voice raspy and low. Keanu's muscles tensed. And I'll keep watching. This ends tonight. The man took 1 step forward. Then another. Holly barked, loud and furious. Gerald gasped behind Keanu. Why are you here? Keanu asked. The man's smile widened. Because someone has to get into that house. Keanu's breath caught. Not his house. Not Gerald's house. A house behind them. Keanu whipped around. Camera 4 lit up. The man wasn't alone. Another figure, smaller, hooded, was slipping around the back of a cul-de-sac, heading toward the Ortega family's home, the only house with elderly grandparents who rarely locked their sliding door. Keanu's instincts kicked in instantly. He shouted, Gerald, call the police now. Gerald scrambled back toward his porch, nearly tripping. Keanu turned back toward the intruder, but the man lunged first. He swung the crowbar with brutal speed. Keanu dodged, the metal slicing through the air inches from his cheek. Holly barked and lunged, forcing the intruder to stumble backward. Keanu moved fast, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting sharply. The crowbar clattered to the ground. The intruder slashed with his free hand, wild and feral, catching Keanu's arm with a shallow cut. Red Leaf Ridge erupted with lights, porch lights, phone lights, blinds flashing open. Another scream echoed from the Ortega house. Keanu dropped the first intruder with a swift, controlled takedown and sprinted across the yard toward the second figure. The floodlight cast long shadows behind him as he launched himself over a hedge and into the Ortega backyard. The sliding door was half open. A dark figure was halfway inside. Holly chased behind him, barking like thunder. Keanu grabbed the hooded figure's leg and pulled them backward, slamming them onto the deck. The figure scrambled, but Keanu pinned them down, breathing hard, adrenaline surging through every muscle. Gerald's voice echoed behind him. "Police are on their way." Neighbors spilled outside. Lights flashed. The neighborhood erupted in chaos as both intruders were subdued, one by Keanu, one held at bay by Holly's relentless barking. For the first time in 4 nights, the street was no longer quiet. And for the first time ever, the HOA and everyone else finally understood why Keanu's floodlight had stayed on. But the real shock was still coming. Because when the police questioned the intruders, they mentioned something that made Keanu's blood run cold. They hadn't chosen this neighborhood randomly. They had come specifically for a house. The house with something inside that someone else wanted. The HOA conference room was silent, the kind of silence that made every breath feel heavy. Keanu stood near the back, hands folded gently, as the board members settled into their seats. They had postponed this emergency meeting 3 times already, but after the chaotic night patrol and the growing rumors across the neighborhood, they could no longer avoid it. A projector sat on the long oak table, ready to display the video that had everyone whispering. Mrs. Hulbert, the stern HOA president who had once been so eager to find Keanu, looked rattled. Her eyes carried shadows from too many sleepless nights. On the agenda was a single line, "Review of Security Incident." But everyone in the room knew what that really meant. They were about to watch the footage from Keanu's floodlight camera, the one they had complained about so fiercely. Keanu stayed quiet as the board argued over who should press play. The tension in the air was almost electric. Finally, one of the members hit the button, and the projector flickered to life. The first thing on screen was the floodlight's beam cutting through the night, illuminating the neighbor's yard. The familiar outlines of fences and driveways gave a sense of normalcy until movement appeared. A tall, hooded figure stepped into view, stalking toward the Smiths' home with slow, predatory confidence. The room collectively inhaled. The board had expected maybe a raccoon, a teenager, a prank, but not this. In the footage, the man tried the windows, peered inside, and then walked around the corner toward the back door. Every second felt like the ticking of a bomb. Mrs. Holberg's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table. She lived only 2 houses down from the Smiths. The thought that she, or her husband, could have been next made her stomach turn. Then came the moment that changed everything. Keanu's floodlight snapped on at full brightness, triggered by motion. The intruder froze, startled, and looked directly into the camera. The high-resolution lens captured his face in chilling clarity. The HOA members gasped. This wasn't just a stranger. It was a man wanted for a string of violent break-ins across the city. Without the floodlight, he would have melted into the darkness unnoticed. But in the video, the man panicked and sprinted away, tripping over a garden pot and scrambling out of the neighborhood. The police report followed. Officers later confirmed the suspect had been apprehended because the footage gave them a perfect visual ID. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the air felt different. It wasn't judgment now. It was a heavy, collective guilt. The projector clicked off. The room stayed dark for a long moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the machine cooling down. Finally, Mrs. Holberg stood and walked toward Keanu. For the first time since he had moved in, her voice wasn't sharp or controlling. It was fragile, almost remorseful. "Mr. Reeves." "Keanu," she said softly, "we owe you an apology. We didn't understand. We thought you were disrupting the look of the neighborhood. But you were protecting us." Keanu offered a humble smile, the kind that held no resentment, only understanding. "I wasn't trying to break rules," he said gently. "I just wanted everyone to be safe. Sometimes a little light keeps a lot of darkness away." His calm, steady presence made several members shift uncomfortably, because it was clear he had shown them more grace than they had ever shown him. By the end of the meeting, the HOA voted unanimously, not only to drop all complaints against Keanu, but also to implement new, modern security allowances inspired by his setup. Floodlights, cameras, alarm systems, all now permitted. The story spread throughout the neighborhood, reshaping how people saw him. Instead of the celebrity who didn't follow the rules, he became the neighbor who quietly prevented a tragedy. When Keanu walked home that evening, homeowners waved from porches, offering grateful smiles and nods. Even Mr. Holberg jogged over to shake his hand, thanking him personally. As Keanu reached his porch, the floodlight clicked on, casting its warm glow across his yard. He paused and looked back down the street. Kids spiked, dogs sparked, families chatted by fences. The neighborhood felt alive again, safe again. And for a moment, as the cool night breeze brushed against him, Keanu allowed himself a small, peaceful smile. He hadn't set out to be a hero. He had only wanted to help. But in a world full of shadows, sometimes the simplest light could make all the difference.